Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of Scott's Selections here on March 30th. Just a quick recap of what happened yesterday. Unfortunately, we suffered our first string of consecutive losses as we ended up losing the North Carolina game as we took them -5 against Auburn. The game actually played out exactly the way that I thought it would in terms of the pacing and in terms of the keys to victory for Auburn. But unfortunately, as I said yesterday, the key to the game for North Carolina would be limiting Auburn on the three-point line. I thought North Carolina's length would be able to do that. I knew that if Auburn ended up hitting enough of their threes, they would be able to win this game relatively easily. I thought this game was going to be a blowout one way or another. I thought either Auburn would hit most of their threes or North Carolina would be able to limit Auburn's success from the three-point line. I gambled on option B, and needless to say, that did not work out as Auburn shot roughly 46% from three and went 17 of 37 from the three-point line. I understand the idea of, North Carolina, like clearly they weren't prepared for Auburn's three-point, just marksmanship, but giving up 97 points in a Sweet 16 game, that's kind of unacceptable. And even for Roy Williams, I feel like he just didn't make any adjustments whatsoever the entire second half. Realistically, Roy Williams, I know that he's well regarded as being a fantastic head coach in college basketball. Am I the one who thinks he's slightly overrated? I know that he's won a couple of championships, but he's not I just don't understand why they weren't pressing on the inbound when they were down double digits, about 3 minutes to go. And how do you give up 56 points in the second half? I don't get it. I didn't think that any adjustments were made from North Carolina. Thanks, Jerry. We're going to try to bounce back here. Romeo, Gonzaga, I'm still rooting for him, even though the bracket that I shared on this YouTube channel didn't work out. I have multiple brackets, and the other two actually have Gonzaga in the championship game. So I definitely think Gonzaga is poised to make a serious run in this tournament. But anyway, we ended up suffering a loss yesterday, but we are looking to bounce back. Our record on this show is still respectable. It's currently 13-6-1 for plus 5.7 units. But luckily, if you ended up following my baseball Twitter pick that I had yesterday, we were able to redeem that loss on North Carolina with a nice Padres -1.5 against the San Francisco Giants, as we ended up getting some plus profit there at plus 144 at the line that we got. Padres tried to choke it away late. They were up 4-0 going into the ninth inning. Then, needless to say, the Giants ended up loading the bases down 4-1, but the Padres were able to get out of it with a 4-1 victory. Other than that, our other leans that I want to go over for yesterday, overall, we had a pretty good day in terms of leans. College basketball for yesterday, we did recommend Virginia Tech plus the points against Duke. That ended up winning. We recommended the under as well as Kentucky in that game between Kentucky and Houston. That won easily. And we also recommended Michigan State as well as the under 148 in that game, and both of those won relatively easily as well. As for the Green Bay-Bakersfield game, we did recommend the over in that game, which ended up losing by about 9.5 points. But overall, solid day for our college basketball leans, with the exception of our pick of the day involving North Carolina. Now to just briefly go over the baseball leans that we had yesterday. Just a reminder, morning, Terry. Just a reminder for anybody, if any of you have questions with regard to specific matchups coming up today, or maybe how I handicap games personally, don't be afraid to ask that, and I'll gladly get to that as I look through yesterday's leans. And thank you, Virgie. It was a very nice run line there. Padres, it looked like they were going to blow the game open early. They ended up I thought they were going to score like 6 runs or so against Holland, but they ended up scoring 4. Definitely enough to get the job done, as the Giants' offense has scored 1 run in the first 18 innings of the season. The Giants are one of the worst teams in the league. I think they should trade Bumgarner already. I understand the idea of keeping high-level pitching, but when your team's not going to be good enough to make the playoffs anyway, Bumgarner's playoff success doesn't necessarily matter when your team is in the dumpster the entire season. Morning, Jorge. Thanks for joining us. So just to recap yesterday, we thought Detroit would potentially get it done. They ended up losing to Toronto. For Tampa and Houston, Tampa ended up getting the job done. We were right about Colorado. We were right about St. Louis. It's actually a shame, though, that even though the Padres ended up covering the 1.5 run line, I ended up doubling down on the Angels in Oakland over 8.5. in a parlay there. That ended up losing. I don't know if it was a bad beat or not because they ended up scoring 8 in the end. They had no runs by the 6th inning, except the Angels had the bases loaded, no outs in the 5th, and then didn't end up scoring. Oakland had runners on 2nd and 3rd with 1 out. They didn't score either. Estrada and Harvey pitched well, and then the Angels ended up scoring 6 runs by themselves in the 8th and 9th inning to give us that 6-2 margin, which was half a run short. But moving on, Boston ended up having a furious comeback, scoring 4 runs in the last 2 innings as they won 7-6 to end the Mariners' perfect season so far. The Padres, we got right on the money, and we did recommend the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers over 7 in that game. We thought the line was too low. That line ended up going to extra innings, but it ended up it went over at 4-4 going into extras, so the over already won, but the Diamondbacks ended up pulling it out in 13 innings. Now, I know most of you are used to me giving out videos sometimes in the mid-afternoon or the late night, but since baseball season is upon us and since there are a lot of early games going on, and the first game is actually going to be between the Mets and the Nationals, which should be taking place in about an hour and a half, I thought it would be better for Saturdays in particular, and including Sundays, for me to do these videos a little bit earlier so I can give you my baseball leans before any of the games actually begin. But before we do, I'm actually going to go through all that. First, I'm going to be doing the leans first, and then I'll be going over the play of the day. In the first game, you have the Mets versus the Nationals with Syndergaard and Strasburg. The line is currently at over/under 7.5. I have to lean to the under here. Both teams did nothing offensively. I know Scherzer and DeGrom pitched gems on opening day, which is expected. Syndergaard, when healthy, is also great. I think Syndergaard, when healthy, has more dynamic stuff than DeGrom, but DeGrom is more consistent. And then Strasburg has the stuff to be great, but he's had injury issues. I'm going into that right now, Brian. I would lean towards the under 7.5 in that game. If you want, just to keep in mind, some books offer props with regard to baseball, which I find profitable. I don't know what exactly the line is in terms of no-run first inning in that Mets-Nationals game, but I definitely think that it is worth a look, as both pitchers will be looking for, great performances, just like DeGrom and Scherzer had on opening day. It is important to note, though, that if you are leaning towards the under, there is a lot of wind that is going to be blowing out to dead center field, roughly 10-mile-per-hour winds blowing out to center. So if you are afraid of, the long ball, that would be something to keep in mind. Do I think it's really going to matter? No, because in order for home runs to truly hurt you in a total, you tend to need runners on base, and I don't really think the Mets or the Nationals will be able to generate enough runs on base. But in terms of Mets games and Nationals games as well, instead of taking the full game on the under, you might want to look into the first 5 innings. People tend to just think to bet the under full game, but you also have to factor in bullpens, and the Mets bullpen, I know they ended up bringing back Familia. I know that they have some pieces with Edwin Diaz. So their 8-9 combo is pretty solid in terms of relief pitchers. The Nationals bullpen, I'm not a fan of at all. So if you are afraid of teams' bullpens, there are ways to circumvent that, to try to keep the value you have on a play without needing to rely on really bad bullpens or starting pitching. So I would recommend, in terms of the under, I like the full game under, but if you want to play it safer, the first 5 under is definitely going to be the safer play on that one. Moving on, you have the Yankees and the Orioles. This game, the Yankees are laying 360 in some spots. 330 at 5 dimes, though, with their reduced juice. It actually just went down to 340 as I speak about that. But overall, I got to lean to the Yankees in this one with Paxson versus Kearns. If you want to know my honest opinion, I'd look for some alternative run lines. I do think Paxson will struggle a bit adjusting to the short porch in right as a left-handed pitcher. Plus the wind's blowing out to right field. I think that Paxton will pitch well, but it would not surprise me to see him give up 2 or 3 runs in the span of about 6 innings, as the Yankees will look for him to remain healthy over the course of the entire season, as he got injured with the Mariners last year towards the end of that campaign as the team imploded. So for me, I would lean, I think the Yankees are going to win the game outright. Do I think there's any value in taking the Yankees? No. Do I think there's any value in the 1.5? No. If you want to know what I would take personally, I would look for an alternative run line involving the Orioles at roughly plus 3.5 or plus 2.5 runs. I think this game will be closer than people expect. Yankees lineup's great. Orioles lineup is not. but I don't think the Yankees should be priced. Conceptually, I just don't agree with pricing any baseball team in the minus 330s or the minus 340s games when baseball just comes down to a game of inches. And the Orioles have also done relatively well in the early months in past seasons. I know last year they were terrible, but the Orioles actually had the longest active streak of all baseball teams with consecutive opening day victories. That streak was shattered, but I expect Paxson to struggle a little bit adjusting to the transition of Yankee Stadium, and I think that the over 8.5 is potentially worth a look in that game. Moving on, you have the Indians versus the Twins. You have Bauer versus Odorizzi. Twins won the first game 2-0. The issue with Cleveland right now is the fact that Francisco Lindor is not playing as he is currently rehabbing an injury. In terms of the lines, money has come in on the Indians. I would have to lean to the Indians because I think Bauer is definitely a better pitcher than Odorizzi, but the Twins are definitely a lot healthier than the Indians at this point in time. I would lean towards the Indians, but I don't really see much value on there, especially when the Indians are not at full strength, I should say. Morning, George. How's it going? Moving on, you have Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Money has come in on Cincinnati. In terms of these pitchers, I think the Reds will win the game. But in terms of value, I have to look towards Pittsburgh. Maybe because I'm a biased Yankee fan, I am just not on board the Sonny Gray train. I think that he was extremely solid in Oakland, came to the Yankees, wasn't really that impressed, also proceeded to roast the Yankees coaching staff instead of taking responsibility for the fact that he just struggled mightily dealing with that stadium. I think Sonny Gray has arm talent, but he tends to pitch around the strike zone. I think that Pittsburgh should be able to get the job done, but at least to get the job done to keep it close for some value. It is important to note that Sterling Marte, Pittsburgh's best player, might not play in this game as he had to leave opening day early with a migraine headache. I don't really know. Thank you, Warriors fan. Morning to you too. Bad 2 days. It is what it is. We will try to bounce back. We are still up over 5 units on the show, so we will try to keep it rolling in this one. And that is not even including the Twitter plays that we had on baseball, where we are currently 2-0 on those, including a plus 144 winner yesterday with Padres money line. Moving on, you have the White Sox versus Kansas City with Junis versus Lopez. Both the teams are terrible. In terms of value, money has come in on Kansas City. I'd have to lean towards the White Sox. After Salvador Perez got injured, I just don't see where the Royals are going to be scoring their runs. I know Junis is considered the ace of the staff, quote unquote, but I do think that the White Sox do have some promising prospects who could, provide a lot of offense by themselves, specifically with Jimenez, who's arguably the best prospect in baseball. So I would lean towards the White Sox in that one. Next, you have Detroit and Toronto. You have Turnbull versus Aaron Sanchez. I'd have to lean towards Toronto here. Both teams are not great. Toronto's offense finally scored some runs. They won 6-0. Detroit's only scored 2 runs in the first 2 games of the season, and I think Aaron Sanchez is significantly a better pitcher than Turnbull. Sanchez has been wild in past years, but he does have very dynamic stuff, and I think Detroit's offense will continue to struggle. Yeah, Jorge, I was giving out Twitter plays each of the last 2 days, and I will quickly just put my Twitter handle in there again. I'm doing that also pretty much every day, where in addition to the play of the day, I will be providing one baseball play on my Twitter where I see value. In terms of player of the day, I will be going into that in a second, but I thought I should give my leans first. So we are going with the Blue Jays in that game. Moving on, you have the Phillies and Atlanta. You have Bryce Wilson, 21-year-old pitcher, really young, versus Nick Pivetta. I'm not a Nick Pivetta guy, but in terms of the game, money has come in on the over. I personally like the over, and if you want to be a little bit more specific, I also like the Phillies team total in this game. Bryce Wilson, anytime you have a youngster coming in and he has to face the likes of Hoskins and Harper, and the fact that the Phillies offense exploded in the first game, I could see it being a long afternoon for the young 21-year-old. I think that the Phillies will win this game outright. Money's come in on the Phillies. They went from minus 136 to minus 154, according to covers.com. And I think that the Phillies will score at least 5 runs in this game, in my opinion. So if you're looking at that game, some thoughts on the Philadelphia team total in that game over. Moving on, you have Colorado versus Miami. You have Tyler Anderson versus Pablo Lopez. Yesterday, I did say that I thought the Rockies would win, but I thought there was value on the Marlins. I actually had a small personal play on the Marlins money line at plus 150. They were up 1-0. It looked pretty promising, and then the bullpen came in and the wheels came off. Shout out to Sergio Romo for putting up an ERA of about 54 in his first outing of the season. If you didn't know, Sergio Romo, former Giants closer, is apparently with the Marlins now, and he's not that good anymore. So he gave up roughly 3 runs in about 2/3 of an inning for an ERA of 54, which pretty much sabotaged my bet, especially after Ian Desmond ended up robbing me of a home run, which would have tied the game in the 8th inning. It was a struggle. Miami is just an awful team. Money has come in on Miami. I don't really care. I'd have to lean on Colorado in that one. This Miami team can't score. Moving on, Houston and Tampa Bay. That is actually going to be the play of the day, so I will be skipping that for now. Next, you have the Cardinals versus the Milwaukee Brewers. You have a battle between Hudson and Woodruff. Lean to Milwaukee here. Goldschmidt went off for 3 home runs yesterday, but it seems like the Brewers are the deeper overall team. Woodruff is extremely solid. Yeah, Jerry, will do. I will talk about which leans I like the most right after I finish covering the entire baseball card. In terms of Woodruff versus Hudson, Hudson's extremely new. He's extremely young. I think he'll struggle in his first outing in Miller Park versus the likes of Yelich and Kane, where Woodruff has turned into a very solid pitcher. As he hit the playoff run, the Brewers instilled a lot of trust in him, and money has already come in on the Brewers. Lean to Milwaukee in that one. Also, I lean a little bit to the over, but it wouldn't surprise me if Woodruff actually pitches well in this game. Next, you have the Cubs versus the Rangers, where you have Darvish versus Vólquez. Vólquez has been in the league for a long time. It's been a while since he was traded for Josh Hamilton or in the younger part of his career. Lean to the Cubs here. Darvish is a huge wild card. I think there is value on Texas in terms of the plus 135 money line. But Darvish is also facing his former team that got rid of him, and I would not be surprised to see Darvish post-surgery pitch well. It's also not the playoffs, so Darvish is more inclined to perform well instead of the way that he performed against the Houston Astros back in Game 7 of that World Series. Moving on, you have the Giants versus the Padres. You have Nick Margevicius. I personally never heard of him. He's relatively new. Versus Derek Rodriguez. Very solid pitcher, actually. He's the ace of the Giants staff. And for me in this game, he has a borderline mullet for his hair. Not that that's relevant, but if you probably have seen him before. I lean towards the under in this game at 8, even though I like the Padres winning this game. I'm still not accustomed to – I still didn't like what I see from the Padres bullpen in that game. And the Padres starter is also young, and I think it's a little bit unpredictable. The Giants they right now have 1 run in the first 2 games of the season. I have to assume they're going to score something, but until they actually do, I have to lean to the under 8 in this game. Rodriguez was extremely solid last year for a team that has an inept offense. I think the Giants are one of the worst teams in the league, so I never really want to back them on a side perspective, but I will use their inept offense against them, and I will be siding with the under 8 in that game in Petco Park. Moving on, you have the Angels versus the A's with Felix Pena versus Brett Anderson. I would lean towards Oakland in this game. Oakland's 1-3. I think it's kind of time for them to try to start rallying. The Angels, Trout was fantastic again yesterday. Almost got us that over with that 2-run double he hit in the 8th inning. But overall, besides Trout, I don't really think there's much talent on that lineup. Pujols is way past his prime, and if he hits anything that's inside the infield, he's a guaranteed out because he's the slowest base runner in all of baseball. I don't think the Angels have much besides Trout and that 3-4-5 in their lineup, where I think the A's are a little bit deeper. Crush Davis had another home run last night. They still have a lot of talent. I think the A's will get it done at home and win that game at roughly a -120. Moving on, you have the Red Sox and the Mariners. Rodriguez versus Leak. I'd have to lean to the Red Sox. Mariners had a great chance to go 4-0. They ended up blowing a 3-run lead in the last 2 innings, including a 3-run homer by Mitch Moreland in the 9th. I have to lean to the Red Sox. Red Sox, I chalked the first game up to just Sale being, I don't know, still looks like something's wrong with Sale's arm. Something to keep in mind moving forward. Rodriguez has been extremely solid. He tends to get a lot of run support. I would lean towards the Red Sox and the over in that game. Thanks, Don. Yeah, yesterday, besides the actual play of the day, we actually did relatively well, including the Twitter play. But play of the day is the main play on this channel, so we will look to avoid losing 3 straight. Moving on, you have Arizona versus the Dodgers with Godley versus Maeda. I think there's a lot of value here on the Diamondbacks money line. Maeda has been awful historically against the Diamondbacks. Is Godley a fantastic pitcher? No, but he's definitely serviceable. The 7.5 line I think is also low. I'd lean to the over again, especially with the depleted bullpens from both teams having to go 13 innings yesterday. I'd lean towards the over 7.5, and I would also a small lean on Diamondbacks money line or +1. Now for the play of the day, we are going to be looking at baseball because college basketball has not gone our way. I will also be looking at some leans for college basketball today, but I didn't really like the card that much. But play of the day is going to be on the Astros money line, which is currently, as I look at the lines right now, the line is currently at -112 at BetOnline. And in this matchup, you have Collin McHugh versus Tyler Glasnow. Both teams are 1-1. They split the first 2 games of the season. This game is in Tampa Bay. It is important to note that both pitchers here, Collin McHugh, career record of 54-38. Tyler Glasnow, career record of 4-16. I'm going to repeat that. Glasnow's record is 4-16 in his career. And in spring training this year, Glasnow went 0-5. McHugh wasn't great in spring training either, as he had an ERA of above 10. But overall, there are a couple of trends to support Houston in this game. The Astros are 4-0 in McHugh's last 4 starts during Game 3 of a series. The Astros are also 6-1 in McHugh's last 7 starts. And the Astros are 4-1 in McHugh's last 5 Saturday starts, where the Rays are 0-4 in Glasnow's last 4 starts on AstroTurf, and the Rays are 1-5 in Glasnow's last 6 starts. Glasnow is one of those high-profile pitching prospects who people continue to think is going to turn a corner, so to speak, and I don't see it. I've faded him pretty much his entire career, and he continues to struggle, not to mention the fact that Houston's offense is significantly better in terms of lineup talent than Tampa Bay's. Although the official lineups are not out yet this early, the projected lineups are out on RotoWire, which I use every day for my baseball daily lineups. You have Springer, Altuve, Bregman, Brantley, Correa, Gurriel, Reddick, White, and Chirinos. And then for the Rays, these are all projected. You have Meadows, Pham, Choi, Diaz, Lowe, Adams, Wendell, Kiermaier, and Nino. So based on that, I know that the Astros lineup has struggled in the first 2 days as it's only scored 7 runs. But yeah, I know Carolina also killed my ticket too, especially with that Padres money line. But Auburn at 17-3 is not much you can do about it. We'll just move on to brighter days up ahead, including today. For this game, I would lean to the Astros. Astros lost yesterday after getting out to a quick 2-0 lead. I think that I just don't think Tampa should be that. I don't think the spread. I don't think the money line should be this low. I think the Astros should be favored by somewhere in the 130 range in this, specifically with the long-term sample size of McHugh. He has a solid winning percentage in the pros, and his numbers against the Rays batters are actually extremely solid in terms of opposing batting percentages, opposing batting averages, where money has come in on Tampa early on, but McHugh, in terms of the active Rays on the roster, they're hitting about a combined 150 against McHugh, whereas Glasnow hasn't faced pretty much the entirety of the Astros lineup. I expect Correa to get a couple of hits. I expect Altuve and Springer to be very active on the base pads. And I just don't think that the Rays should be priced this low of a dog at roughly +100 or +110. I think the Astros will win this game. I also would consider doing a first 5-inning team total on the Astros. The juice is too high, though, for like an actual play. It might be my Twitter play, but it's currently at -1.5 at -155 for the Astros. In other words, you need 2 runs by the Astros by the 6th inning, and I think that the Astros will be able to do that. So your play of the day will be on the Houston Astros at -112 at BetOnline. Yeah, anytime you give up that many threes, you deserve to lose a game. I didn't think Roy Williams really did anything yesterday. Carolina looked sloppy from the get-go, and Roy Williams made no adjustments, while Bruce Pearl actually was able to do something. I do feel bad about the Okeke injury, though, for Auburn. He was playing extremely well before. In my opinion, I think he tore his ACL. But hopefully he's able to get back to a speedy recovery because he will play an integral part of Auburn in future seasons to come. Now, the two games of college basketball for lanes, you have Gonzaga versus Texas Tech, where the over-unders are roughly 140. Gonzaga's minus 4.5. I'm not going to touch the side. I think Texas Tech will win this game outright, but I will definitely lean to the under 140. This total doesn't really make any sense to me. How's it going, Rebecca? Thanks for joining us. I would have to lean towards the under. Texas Tech's defense just gave up 44 points to Michigan. This defense, in my opinion, is the best defense in the country. I think it's better than Virginia's. And Gonzaga, they were very sloppy against Florida State, but their length also creates a lot of problems for opposing offenses, and Texas Tech doesn't have much length. I think that this game will be in the 130s to high 120s. I have to lean to the under in that game at 140. That just looks too high to me. Moving on, Purdue and Virginia. Virginia is favored by 4.5, and the total is currently at over under 126.5. I'd have to lean to the under in that game as well. Purdue, they do like to go up-tempo. Virginia does not. I have to lean towards the under in that game, as Purdue with Harms should be able to close up the paint, while I think Virginia will be able to do enough to limit Carsen Edwards and his success. Carsen Edwards will probably drop 20-plus points, but it really depends on how many shots Carsen Edwards decides to take. And I think that Virginia will do a good job not fouling and slowing the pace of play and forcing this game into a half-court offense. So in terms of both of those games, I personally like the under in both games tonight. As for the Virginia-Purdue, in terms of who I think is going to win, I'd lean to Gonzaga because of their length. I think they'll dominate on the boards, and I'd lean towards Virginia. This is a time where something's got to give between these two coaches for Purdue and Virginia with Painter and Bennett. Both coaches have underachieved in recent years in the NCAA tournament, and now you are looking at a situation where Bennett has another chance to reach the Final Four that has eluded him his entire career at Virginia, especially after that double-digit lead against Syracuse in the Elite Eight a couple of years ago before Malachi Richardson went off as a name from the past who never developed into anything NBA-related. But they ended up choking away a Final Four chance. Now they have another chance. Purdue is a solid team, but I'm concerned by Purdue. I think this team is destined to choke at some point. I think Virginia is kind of the same way, but Virginia has been able to hold the fort, while Purdue has been they almost blew a 16-point lead to Tennessee. And I think we can all agree if Tennessee didn't foul on that three-pointer, or if they made at least half of their free throws, Tennessee would have won that game. Purdue definitely outplayed Tennessee, but the fact that they let Tennessee hang around, I find a serious red flag for me, as Coach Painter kind of got complacent, and I don't think you can get complacent against the backline defense of Virginia because they will make it tough for anybody. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Is what I love to do. Glad I can help provide some feedback. But your play of the day, as I said before, is going to be on the Astros money line, which is available at minus 112 at Bet Online. If you also are a little bit afraid of McHugh in spring training with his numbers, I understand that. Look towards the team total for the Astros, either in the full game or the first 5 innings. But I'm a little bit hesitant on the full game because the Astros lineup has only put up 7 runs in the first 2 games. This offense is great, but it might take them a couple of games to actually get their foot going. And I think that a matchup against Glasnow is just what the doctor ordered for the Astros. But we're at about the 29-minute mark. That is going to do it for this installment of Scott Selections here on March 30th. Stay posted on my Twitter. I will be uploading another play in baseball, which I will be doing daily on my personal Twitter account, which I posted the link for earlier in the chat. Our record is 13-6-1 for plus 5.7 units. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as I will continue to be providing you with daily betting information every day, because this is personally what I love to do. Thanks, Don. I think they should too. I think this game will be close depending on how well McHugh pitches, but McHugh's numbers and his sample size against the Rays lineup are extremely solid. That's right, Jerry. I forgot about my top leans, which I will go into. Sorry about that. In terms of baseball, well, my top leans, my favorite lean would be the Gonzaga Texas Tech under at 140. I think that total is way too high. I think this game will be somewhere in the low 130s to high 120s. I think the total is way too high in this game. So that would be my top lean, would be the under in that game. Other than that, my other lean, I would be leaning towards the Philadelphia Phillies team total over against Bryce Wilson. I expect Wilson to struggle in his first game against the Phillies, and I expect Harper to potentially homer or to get a hit after he was booed in his first game. And that's what life is in Philly, especially when you have a 13-year contract to deal with it. I'm sure Harper's going to have a lot of fun dealing with that fan base moving on. And I also like the under 8 in the Padres-San Francisco Giants game. So my 3 leans are going to be on the Texas Tech full game under, the Philadelphia Phillies team total, and the full game under between the Padres and the Giants at 8. And your pick of the day, as I said before, is going to be on the Houston Astros to win the game outright against the Tampa Bay Rays at -112. Thanks, Virgie. Thanks, Jeff. That's going to do it, though. Hope that answered your question, Jerry. Have a good day, everybody.